The story of how philosophy birthed analytical psychology begins in the stormy mind of Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century thinker whose ideas crackled with intensity. Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher, he was a psychological provocateur, digging into the depths of human nature with a pickaxe made of words. His concepts, like the will to power, the death of God, and the Übermensch, didn't just sit quietly on the page, they roared into the psyche, demanding attention. For Nietzsche, life was a chaotic dance of instincts, drives, and meaning-making, and he saw humanity teetering on the edge of a void left by crumbling institutions. This wasn't abstract musing. It was a call to confront the raw, unfiltered self. Enter Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist who, decades later, would pick up these threads and weave them into a tapestry of the unconscious. Jung wasn't a disciple of Nietzsche, far from it, but he couldn't escape the echoes of the philosopher's voice. Where Nietzsche raged against the dying light of tradition, Jung sought to illuminate what lay beneath it, a collective unconscious, a reservoir of archetypes, a psychological cosmos. Their connection isn't linear, it's a collision of titanic ideas reshaping how we understand the mind. Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead wasn't just a theological jab, it was a psychological earthquake. He argued that the decline of religious authority left humanity adrift, forced to forge meaning in a world stripped of absolutes. This wasn't despair for Nietzsche, it was liberation, albeit a terrifying one. He believed we'd have to wrestle with our instincts, our shadows, to create something new. The will to power, his idea of an innate drive to assert and overcome, pulsed at the heart of this struggle. It wasn't about domination over others, but a mastery of self, a concept that reverberated in Jung's work years later. Jung, too, saw the psyche as a battleground, but where Nietzsche celebrated the individual's heroic ascent, Jung peered into the depths. He wondered, what happens when the structures collapse? What emerges from the ruins? For Jung, the answer lay in the unconscious, not just a personal basement of repressed desires, but a vast, shared sea of symbols and myths. Nietzsche's Death of God became, in Jung's hands, an invitation to explore the divine within, a psychological rebirth through the archetypes that connect us all. The Übermensch, Nietzsche's vision of a self-overcoming human, looms large in this tale. This wasn't a cape-wearing superhero, but a psychological ideal, a person who transcends herd morality, embraces life's chaos, and crafts their own values. Nietzsche saw this figure as the antidote to nihilism, a beacon in a world unmoored from tradition. He didn't offer a roadmap, he threw down a gauntlet. The Übermensch was less a destination and more a process, a relentless becoming. Jung, reading Nietzsche, didn't adopt this idea wholesale, but it sparked something in him. He saw parallels in his own concept of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, where one integrates the conscious and unconscious self. For Jung, this wasn't about rejecting society's rules, but about discovering a deeper authenticity. Where Nietzsche's Übermensch stood alone, forging meaning in solitude, Jung's individuated self was tethered to the collective unconscious, drawing strength from humanity's shared myths. The two ideas danced together uneasily, Nietzsche's fierce individualism clashing with Jung's communal depths. Yet both recognized the psyche's potential to transcend, to evolve beyond the ordinary, driven by forces buried within. Zarathustra, Nietzsche's poetic prophet, strides into this narrative with a voice like thunder. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche crafted a mythic figure who descended from the mountains to preach self-overcoming and eternal recurrence. The idea that life loops infinitely, challenging us to affirm every moment. This wasn't just philosophy, it was a psychological experiment. Could we bear the weight of existence without flinching? Zarathustra's call to become who you are echoed through the ages, landing in Jung's lap as he wrestled with the unconscious. Jung, a lover of myth, saw Zarathustra as more than a character. He was an archetype, a wise old man speaking truths from the depths. Jung's patients, too, dreamed of such figures, guiding them through their own labyrinths. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence fascinated Jung, not as a literal doctrine, but as a psychological test. Could the psyche integrate its past, present, and future into a unified whole? This question fueled Jung's exploration of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that hint at a deeper order. Nietzsche's poetic fire met Jung's clinical curiosity, igniting a bridge between philosophy and psychology. Nietzsche's descent into madness adds a haunting layer to this story. By the late 1880s, his mind unraveled, possibly from syphilis, possibly from the sheer weight of his thoughts. His letters grew erratic, signed Dionysus, or the Crucified, blending ecstasy and anguish. This wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a psychological mirror. Nietzsche had spent years plumbing the abyss, celebrating the Dionysian, the wild, instinctual force of life, over the Apollonian order. Did he dive too deep? Jung, who studied Nietzsche's works obsessively, saw this collapse as a cautionary tale. In his own life, Jung teetered on the edge during his confrontation with the unconscious, after splitting with Freud. Visions flooded his mind, blood, chaos, archetypes, but he emerged with the Red Book, a testament to his survival. Nietzsche didn't. For Jung, this underscored a key difference. Nietzsche exalted the Dionysian without anchoring it, while Jung sought balance, integrating the chaos with structure. Analytical psychology became a lifeline, a way to navigate the depths Nietzsche drowned in. The philosopher's madness wasn't a failure, but a lesson Jung internalized. The psyche demands respect, not reckless abandon. The shadow, a cornerstone of Jung's psychology, owes a quiet debt to Nietzsche. Though Jung coined the term, Nietzsche's writings pulse with its essence, the unacknowledged primal underbelly of the self. He reveled in the tension between civilization and savagery, urging us to face our darker drives rather than deny them. In Beyond Good and Evil, he mocked the herd for clinging to shallow virtues, blind to the instincts churning beneath. This wasn't abstract. It was a psychological summons to confront what festers in the dark. Jung took this further, formalizing the shadow as the repressed aspects of personality, everything we reject yet secretly embody. For Jung, ignoring the shadow bred neurosis, embracing it fostered growth. Nietzsche didn't offer a therapy, but his relentless honesty laid the groundwork. Where he wielded a hammer to smash illusions, Jung built a framework to heal the fractures. Their shared insight? The psyche isn't a saintly monolith, it's a battlefield of light and dark, and true strength lies in owning both. Analytical psychology turned Nietzsche's poetic fury into a practical map for self-discovery. The Dionysian and Apollonian duality, Nietzsche's gift from The Birth of Tragedy, ripples through Jung's work in unexpected ways. Nietzsche saw life as a tug-of-war between Dionysus, chaos, passion, the raw pulse of existence, and Apollo, order, reason, the sculpting hand of culture. Neither wins, their tension births art, meaning us. This wasn't just aesthetics, it was a psychological lens on human nature. Jung, ever the synthesizer, didn't name-drop Dionysus or Apollo, but their spirits haunt his theories. The unconscious, with its wild archetypes, is pure Dionysian energy, untamed, surging, alive. The ego, striving for control and coherence, channels Apollo. Individuation, Jung's grand project, mirrors Nietzsche's dance, a harmony of opposites, a union of chaos and form. Jung's patients dreamed of gods and monsters, their psyches staging this ancient drama. Nietzsche framed it as philosophy. Jung saw it as therapy. Both grasped that the mind thrives on conflict, not peace, that our deepest truths emerge from the clash of forces we can't fully tame. Analytical psychology owes its dynamism to this Nietzschean spark, a recognition that balance isn't static but alive. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence isn't just a thought experiment, it's a psychological gauntlet. Imagine living your life on repeat, every joy, every pain, forever. Could you say yes to that? Nietzsche proposed this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. As a test of affirmation, a way to measure one's love for existence. It's brutal, exhilarating, and deeply introspective. Jung encountered this idea and ran with it, not as a cosmic truth, but as a tool for the psyche. He saw patients trapped in cycles, neuroses, repressed traumas looping endlessly, and wondered how to break free. His answer wasn't Nietzsche's stoic yes, but a transformative integration. Eternal recurrence became, in Jung's hands, a metaphor for facing the past, not fleeing it. Through dreams and active imagination, he urged people to revisit their loops, to find meaning in the repetition. Synchronicity, too, nods to this. Moments that feel faded, as if time curls back on itself. Nietzsche's philosophy pushed the psyche to its limits. Jung turned those limits into a laboratory. Analytical psychology emerged as a space to wrestle with recurrence, to turn life's echoes into growth. The collective unconscious, Jung's masterstroke, feels like Nietzsche's mythopoetic world given flesh. Nietzsche didn't use the term, but his obsession with myth, Zarathustra, Dionysus, the Übermensch, hinted at a shared human reservoir. He saw culture as a fragile veneer over ancient instincts, a mask we wear over the eternal. Jung took this intuition and ran, arguing that beneath our personal minds lies a deeper layer, stocked with archetypes, universal patterns like the hero, the mother, the trickster. These aren't learned, they're inherited, woven into our being. Nietzsche's myths were poetic. Jung's were psychological, but the lineage is clear. Where Nietzsche used myth to provoke, Jung used it to heal, seeing archetypes as guides through the chaos of the unconscious. Nietzsche's Dionysian revelry became Jung's shadow. His Übermensch prefigured Jung's individuated self. The collective unconscious isn't Nietzsche's invention, but his fingerprints are all over it, a philosopher's vision refined by a clinician's eye. Analytical psychology stands as a bridge, linking Nietzsche's wild imagination to a science of the soul. Jung's break with Freud marks a pivot where Nietzsche's influence shines. Freud saw the unconscious as a cesspool of repressed desires, a personal dungeon. Jung, emboldened by Nietzsche's broader vista, disagreed. He envisioned a richer unconscious, not just a dumping ground, but a creative wellspring tied to all humanity. Nietzsche's rejection of petty morality and his embrace of life's depths resonated with Jung as he forged analytical psychology. Freud's focus on sexuality felt narrow. Nietzsche's will to power and mythic sweep offered Jung a grander canvas. The split wasn't just professional, it was philosophical. Jung wanted to explore meaning, not just pathology, and Nietzsche's voice egged him on. In the Red Book, Jung wrestled with visions that echoed Zarathustra, prophetic, chaotic, alive. Freud had no patience for such mysticism, but Nietzsche would have grinned. This rift birthed analytical psychology as we know it, a field less about curing symptoms and more about uncovering purpose. Nietzsche didn't cause the break, but his ideas fueled Jung's courage to leap into the unknown, to build a psychology as bold as philosophy. Synchronicity, Jung's late-blooming theory, carries Nietzschean echoes in its defiance of reason. Jung proposed that events could connect meaningfully without cause, a causal coincidences that feel fated. A patient dreams of a scarab, and one taps at the window. A book falls open to a page that changes everything. This wasn't science as Freud knew it. It was closer to Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, a universe winking at itself. Nietzsche didn't talk synchronicity, but his sense of life as a poetic, interconnected web laid the groundwork. He saw meaning where others saw chance, urging us to embrace the mystery. Jung took this further, blending psychology with metaphysics. Critics scoffed, too mystical, too vague, but Jung didn't care. He'd read Nietzsche. He knew the psyche didn't bow to logic alone. Synchronicity became a cornerstone of analytical psychology, a nod to the unseen threads Nietzsche danced with in his writing. It's a concept that asks us to look beyond the surface, to see the mind as part of something larger, a Nietzschean leap into the inexplicable, grounded by Jung's clinical gaze. Nietzsche's critique of morality seeped into Jung's view of the psyche. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche torched conventional ethics as a crutch for the weak, a slave morality that stifled life's vitality. He championed a reevaluation of values, a psychological shedding of guilt and shame. Jung didn't preach this from a mountaintop, but he felt its pull. His shadow work, facing the parts of ourselves we'd rather disown, mirrors Nietzsche's call to embrace the whole self, not just the polite bits. For Jung, morality wasn't the enemy, but its rigidity could strangle the soul. Analytical psychology became a space to question, not conform, to explore how societal norms shape and sometimes distort the psyche. Nietzsche's hammer smashed idols. Jung's therapy dismantled illusions. Both saw the mind as a forge, not a museum, where values could be melted down and recast. This wasn't about anarchy, but authenticity, a psychological honesty that Nietzsche sparked and Jung refined into a method. The result? A psychology less about fitting in and more about standing out. The archetype of the wise old man, a Jungian staple, owes a nod to Nietzsche's Zarathustra. This figure, the sage, the guide, appears in dreams and myths, offering wisdom from the unconscious. Nietzsche's Zarathustra fits the mold, a hermit descending to share hard truths, a voice of the eternal. Jung saw such archetypes as proof of the collective unconscious, patterns etched into our nature. Nietzsche didn't analyze dreams, but he lived them. His writing brims with mythic resonance. Zarathustra wasn't just a character, he was a psychological force, a projection of Nietzsche's own depths. Jung recognized this, seeing in Zarathustra the same energy his patients encountered in their visions. The wise old man became a tool in analytical psychology, a symbol of guidance amid chaos. Nietzsche's prophet didn't heal, but he inspired. Jung turned inspiration into practice. Their interplay reveals a truth. Philosophy and psychology aren't so far apart when both chase the same quarry. The hidden self, the voice beneath the noise. Zarathustra's shadow stretches long, touching Jung's work with a mythic glow. Nietzsche's will to power, often misunderstood as brute force, was really about self-assertion, a drive to shape one's fate. He saw it as life's engine, pulsing through every act, every thought. Jung didn't adopt this term, but its spirit courses through analytical psychology. Individuation, Jung's core process, is a kind of will to power turned inward, a quest to become oneself fully against the tide of conformity. Nietzsche's version was defiant, external. Jung's was reflective, internal. Yet both saw the psyche as dynamic, not passive, a force to be harnessed, not tamed. For Nietzsche, this drive could topple gods. For Jung, it could unearth them from the unconscious. Analytical psychology took Nietzsche's raw energy and gave it structure, a path through the wilderness of the mind. Patients weren't urged to conquer mountains but to climb their own depths, asserting their essence against neurosis and despair. Nietzsche lit the fuse. Jung built the framework to contain the blast. Together, they reframed the psyche as a creator, not a victim. Jung's fascination with alchemy, late in his career, feels like Nietzsche's spirit reborn. Alchemy wasn't just medieval chemistry, it was a psychological allegory, a map of transformation. Jung saw its symbols, nigredo, the blackening, albedo, the whitening, as stages of individuation, the soul's journey to wholeness. Nietzsche didn't study alchemy, but his work brims with its flavor, destruction and renewal, chaos birthing order. His Übermensch could have stepped from an alchemist's crucible, forged through fire. Jung, poring over ancient texts, found a language for what Nietzsche intuited, the psyche as a laboratory, turning leaden instincts into golden meaning. Analytical psychology embraced this metaphor, offering a modern alchemy for the mind. Where Nietzsche's philosophy burned bright and fast, Jung simmered, distilling insights over decades. Both saw transformation as the human calling, not escape, but evolution. Alchemy gave Jung a bridge between Nietzsche's poetic rage and his own clinical precision, a way to ground philosophy in the psyche's muddy depths. It's a fitting tribute. Two thinkers, one wild, one measured, united in the art of becoming. The Red Book, Jung's Private Odyssey, is where Nietzsche's influence blazes clearest. After his break with Freud, Jung plunged into his unconscious, recording visions in a leather-bound tome. The result, chaotic, vivid, prophetic, feels like Zarathustra's echo. Jung met figures like Philemon, a winged sage, and wrestled with a cosmos of archetypes. Nietzsche's Dionysian energy surges through these pages, untamed, intoxicating, alive. Yet Jung didn't lose himself as Nietzsche did. He emerged with a psychology, not a breakdown. The Red Book isn't just a diary, it's a testament to what Nietzsche unleashed. a dive into the abyss that didn't end in ruin. Analytical psychology was born here, in this crucible of dreams, where philosophy met the raw stuff of the soul. Nietzsche's madness hovered as a warning, but his courage fueled Jung's descent. The book stayed private for decades, but its ideas seeped into Jung's public work, shaping a field that dares to ask, what lies beyond the ego? Nietzsche pointed to the void. Jung mapped it. Nietzsche's attack on Christianity wasn't just rebellion, it was a psychological dissection. He saw it as a slave morality, exalting weakness over strength, guilt over joy. This wasn't personal spite, it was a diagnosis of a culture shackling its vitality. Jung, raised in a Christian home, took a softer line but felt the same tremor. He didn't reject religion outright, he reframed it, finding the divine in the psyche's archetypes. The Christ figure became, for Jung, a symbol of the self, a union of opposites. Nietzsche would have scoffed, but the move owes him a debt. Jung, like Nietzsche, refused to let dogma cage the mind. Analytical psychology sidestepped theology for mythology, seeking truth in stories, not sermons. Nietzsche's hammer cleared the rubble. Jung built on the site, crafting a psychology that honored the sacred without bowing to it. Both saw the psyche as a rebel, not a servant, capable of crafting meaning beyond borrowed creeds. Their shared defiance turned the mind into a frontier, not a parish. The trickster archetype, another Jungian gem, dances with Nietzsche's irreverence. This figure, cunning, chaotic, transformative, upends order and mocks the pious. Jung spotted it in myths worldwide, from Loki to Coyote, and in his patient's dreams. Nietzsche didn't name it, but he lived it. His writing taunts, provokes, flips the table on convention. His aphorisms sting like a trickster's jest, forcing us to laugh or rage. Jung saw the trickster as a shadow's playmate, shaking us from complacency toward growth. Analytical psychology gave this energy a home, a way to channel chaos into insight. Nietzsche's trickster spirit didn't heal, it disrupted, leaving us to pick up the pieces. Jung picked them up, weaving a method from the wreckage. Both reveled in the mind's mischief, its refusal to sit still. The trickster ties them together. A philosopher's prank became a psychologist's tool, proving the psyche thrives on upheaval, not just harmony. From Nietzsche's barbs to Jung's archetypes, the lineage sparkles with subversive glee. Nietzsche's legacy in analytical psychology isn't a straight line. It's a constellation. He didn't sit in Jung's chair or coin his terms, but his ideas seeded the soil. The will to power whispers in individuation, eternal recurrence hums in synchronicity. The Übermensch looms over the self. Jung read Nietzsche voraciously, wrestling with his brilliance and his ruin. Where Nietzsche shouted, Jung listened, turning philosophy's thunder into psychology's rain, nourishing, not just striking. Analytical psychology owes its depth to this dialogue, its willingness to plumb the unconscious where Nietzsche only pointed. The philosopher's fire could have burned out. Jung stoked it into a steady flame. Together they redefined the psyche, not a machine to fix, but a mystery to explore. Nietzsche's chaos found a vessel in Jung's structure, a partnership across time that still shapes how we see ourselves. From Zarathustra's peaks to the analyst's couch, their voices merge in a single, enduring question. Who are we really? Jung's psychology isn't Nietzsche's philosophy with a stethoscope. It's a metamorphosis. Nietzsche hurled us into the abyss. Jung taught us to swim there. Analytical psychology took the raw ore of Nietzsche's insights, his myths, his drives, his defiance, and refined it into a discipline. Yet the wildness remains. Jung's archetypes pulse with the same life Nietzsche celebrated. His methods echo the philosopher's call to become. Their differences sharpen the story. Nietzsche's solitude versus Jung's collectivity, his destruction versus Jung's synthesis. But the thread holds. Both saw the psyche as a frontier, not a prison. Analytical psychology stands as a monument to this lineage, a field that dares to ask not just how we function, but why we dream, why we create, why we endure. Nietzsche lit the match. Jung built the hearth. From philosophy's edge to psychology's core, their journey reminds us, the mind isn't static. It's a story endlessly unfolding, shaped by the clash of titans like these.